process is so important to everything in business. It's the reason big businesses get big. Right? It's the reason they're able to scale because they have a process. Instead of me having to manage people, I was then managing a process. And we were hiring people to manage processes. Process is so much easier to manage than a person. Yeah, I tell people all the time, if someone made a mistake, did they follow the process? And if they followed the process, it's not their fault. It's the process's problem.
You work hard in your business. On the Profit by Design podcast, we ask the big question. What has your business done for you lately? Hi, I'm Dr. Sabrina Starling. I'm the business psychologist, the author of the 4-Week Vacation and the How to Hire the Best series, as well as the founder of Tap the Potential, where we coach entrepreneurs like you to design sustainably profitable businesses that give you more time for what matters most and more money in your bank account than ever. Because after all, we believe work supports life, not the other way around. Weekly on the Profit by Design podcast, we bring you tips, tools, and strategies from our own experiences and from the experiences of our guests who are entrepreneurial thought leaders and real life entrepreneurs, all to support you in making intentionally profitable and sustainable business decisions to live the lifestyle you desire. Profit Designers, the 4-Week Vacation, the entrepreneur's ultimate guide to taking your life back from your business is now available. Go to 4weekvacation.com, grab a copy of the book, and be sure to follow the steps there to claim your bonuses. When you purchase the book, you are eligible to join me for my upcoming live training, the 4-Week Vacation, Better Business, Better Life Jumpstart. Plus, and you'll also get an invitation to an exclusive VIP closed door training with me to identify the true profit potential within your business. Just follow the steps at 4weekvacation.com. And I hope that the 4-Week Vacation book inspires you for what's possible. It's time to take your life back from your business. Okay, Ryan, welcome to the Profit by Design podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited about today's conversation.
Oh, I am too. So anytime I get to talk about hiring in small business, I have so much to say. You and I have had lots of conversation. You have a great perspective and handle on this topic, and you bring some unique learning points that I think all of us can benefit from, particularly around the interview process. So I can't wait to dive into that with you. As we get started, I want to share your bio so people really understand where you're coming from. Ryan Englin is passionate about supporting growing businesses, particularly in blue-collar industries, to build amazingly productive companies by hiring the right people. Growing up, he saw his own father working 12-hour shifts and weekends as an owner-operator, witnessing firsthand the struggles that these companies have in hiring quality frontline employees. Ryan was determined to help them find a better way. His company, Core Matters, provides coaching and training on attracting, hiring, and retaining rock star employees. Using his proven process, the Core Fit hiring system, small and mid-sized businesses learn how to start hiring better people faster. We all need that, right, Ryan? That's very important. With almost a decade in the business, Ryan has worked with over 100 clients, helping business owners achieve their goals by hiring the right people. So, Ryan, this is such a big topic. So let's just start with what you saw your father experiencing.
Yeah. So I remember, my dad's been in manufacturing, right? Which that's blue collar back all the way back, right? And I remember growing up, and I thought at the time it was cool because I get to hang out with my dad on the weekends down at the plant. He'd always put me to work. I was always helping him reorganize the warehouse or helping him work on machines or grinding plastic or sweeping, like whatever it was. And, I knew how to drive a forklift before I even thought about driving a car. That's what we did on the weekends. And there were times I remember he wouldn't come home till it was bedtime or after bedtime because he was working so much. And it wasn't until I was older that I realized that the problem wasn't my dad so much. Sure, he loved to work and he was passionate about the work he did, like so many blue-collar business owners. They love what they do. But the problem was he didn't have a team of people he could trust. And so when he was there on the weekends, it wasn't because the work wasn't done. A lot of times he was fixing the work that wasn't done correctly.
Oh, yes. I know so many of our listeners, that's hitting all the buttons right there.
And it took me decades to figure out that's why I'm so passionate about this, because my dad's finally retired now. And even up until retirement, he still worked crazy shifts, weekends, nights, always had it. I tell a story when he brought home his first cell phone. Do you remember those old brick phones, like 2 hands to hold on to it?
Yeah.
He was so excited because now he could go out with us. And if work needed to call him, they could.
Oh, boy, that's like the gateway drug, right?
We don't even think about it now, but our cell phones, they are a leash to the office, like always. And I know so many entrepreneurs that struggle with how do they disconnect from it. But back then, 30 years ago, it was the cool new thing. Like he was hip and cool. He had a cell phone.
Yeah.
But we spent so much time down at the plant, and it was always a struggle for him to find people he could trust. And that was the key component. He had people, he seriously struggled with trusting them to do the work the way he wanted it done.
Yeah. And, in our research with entrepreneurs, that ability to unplug and fully disconnect from the business is lacking in the majority of small businesses. A lot of entrepreneurs deal with that cell phone constantly needing to be available, and unplugging even over the weekend can be hard to do. And so I think it's a huge insight that your dad was working hard, not because he didn't have people necessarily, but because he was having to fix the mistakes that people made. And so he needed better people who would make all those mistakes. But the other piece that's really fascinating about your background is you didn't come straight from that and start coaching business owners on hiring. You have a corporate background, and you did a lot of hiring in the corporate world. So share a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, so I did like every good son and said, I'm not going into the family business, right? Yeah, that was a fun conversation. But yeah, I went and got my degree, and I went into the corporate world, and I worked for one of the largest corporations in the country. And what I was doing for them was I was managing teams. Well, the number one thing you do when you're managing teams for these large organizations is you're hiring all the time. So yes, we had HR that was screening people and going through the resumes and, that kind of stuff, but they'd send a resume to my desk. And I remember we would have days where we would literally interview 100 people in a day. We had to do these group interviews because we couldn't get through them fast enough. And it was at that time that I realized that process is so important to everything in business. It's the reason big businesses get big, right? It's the reason they're able to scale, because they have a process. And instead of managing people, instead of me having to manage people, I was then managing a process. And we were hiring people to manage processes. And the process is so much easier to manage than a person.
Oh, yes.
I tell people all the time, if someone made a mistake, did they follow the process? And if they followed the process, it's not their fault. It's the process's problem.
Yes. On our team, as our team has grown, that has been one of the biggest learning points that I keep having to emphasize, because it's so easy when something goes wrong to start going, well, whose fault is it? Like, where did this problem originate? A lot of times it's our system and our process.
Yeah.
And in a small business, you just need to look at the process first. And how can that be improved before you start pointing fingers at people? But obviously, if you don't have good quality people on your team, they will make mistakes outside the process. So if you hire good people and you strengthen your processes, then things start to flow better.
I tell people all the time, I'd rather have a great process and a good person than a great person and a good process, because they'll still make mistakes.
Yeah.
So I learned a ton about hiring, but what I learned very quickly was that hiring, the interviewing process, which I'm super passionate about, that's my favorite part of hiring, is the interview.
Not many people would say that, Ryan.
No, most people don't say that. I love the interview because you get to know the person. And I think the thing that, and they had this at corporate too, I think you forget that the person that's coming in to apply for that job, to interview with you, they're not doing it because they have this desire to work crazy hours and follow your broken processes and deal with your upset customers, and all in exchange for a couple of dollars. That's not why they're there. They're doing it because there is something personal that is driving them. Whether it's, I need to make more money because I just found out we're having another baby, or I need to make more money because my car is no longer reliable, or, hey, Christmas is coming up and I want to be able to get a new job so that I'm not as stressed around the holidays like I was at my last one. People don't switch jobs because they just want more money, they switch more jobs because there's something personal going on in their life that's kind of forcing them into that situation. And when I realized that in my corporate job, I was building these incredibly effective teams, so effective that I remember one time my boss came in and they said, I don't think these numbers are right because you're so much further ahead of everybody else. And corporate politics aside, I would be the victim of these corporate reshuffles. They would take all my good people and give them to other people. And that's when I became so passionate about the interview, because it's like, I tell this to my coaching clients all the time, it's like dating. You get to meet this person where they are and you get to learn about them and understand what's important to them and kind of go through life with them. And I know that feels real touchy-feely, but for employees, that's what this is.
Well, and I love what you're sharing about that, because right off the bat, you are building engagement because you're being curious about what's driving this person. Why are they here? What matters to them? And then if you do end up hiring them, you have that information already and you can start to engage them as they come on board around what matters to them and the achievement of the company goals and the vision. So that's beautiful. I want to mention, Ryan has written a book about the interview process. It's how to hire the ones you won't want to fire. You can see lots of sticky notes in here. This is and it's short. Our clients love short books. You can read it an hour and a half. You probably will reread it because there's a lot packed in this short book and many good points. So I want to start off. You already mentioned one of the things that we miss right off the bat when someone's coming and going into an interview with us is, what matters to them, what's driving them. What are some of the things that we tend to screw up in the interview process?
So I think the biggest one is we push people through too fast. That's probably the mistake that everybody makes. I ask people all the time, how many people get married after 15 minutes on the first date? Right? Nobody does that.
Yeah.
Well, we interview people for 15 minutes and we're like, they're the ones. Where have they been all my life? And then we make them an offer. And usually what ends up happening is we get extremely disappointed in a few weeks and we're like, they are not who I thought they were. And I'm like, you had 15 minutes. Anybody can fake 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the number one mistake they make, is that they push people through too fast. So I'm a big fan of hire slow and fire quick. Mm-hmm. And when I say hire slow, 15 minutes that's our rapport building. Like, we're finding out just about what they like out of life. We're not even talking about the position or if they're the right fit.
So that I think that's such a key piece, because what stood out to me is when you talk about the screening interview, and that's just the initial, let's ask a few questions and see if they have potential so they can move along further in the interview. I mean, you've already hit the nail on the head with, we try to sell the position very quickly to somebody and we tell them too much. But the point that you made in the book is we're talking about ourselves. Like, if you relate this to dating, you don't go on a date and spend the first 15 minutes talking all about yourself. Mm-hmm. You want to be interested and not worry about being interesting. Mm-hmm. So again, good dating advice here.
Yeah, it's crazy.
People didn't realize they were getting dating advice. This is a hiring discussion. But be interested in them and share. But also the point you make in there is when we start talking all about the company right away, we're actually giving them the answers that we're going to ask them to give us later. Like, we're giving them the answers to the test, and we're setting ourselves up to mishire right from the get-go. So say a little bit more about this.
It was funny. I'll tell you a personal story. And this was probably about 6 months ago. I was talking about this during one of my initial calls with a brand new client. He was in the trades, and I was talking about this fact that we spend 30 minutes just gushing about all of our goals and what we want to accomplish and everything else. And he starts laughing, like hysterically laughing on the call. And I was like, he's like, I'm going to send you something. And he sent me his interview guide that he got from a highly regarded industry coach. And the first thing is spend 25 to 30 minutes talking about how awesome your company is. Like, that was the advice that was given. And yeah, it's just crazy. I'm like, why don't we spend 25 to 30 minutes talking about how awesome they are? Because the thing you have to remember is most employees aren't used to that. It's a pattern interrupt. And people they're drawn to what's different. They really are, especially when it's in the context of, we're doing this because we care about you as a person, as a human being, not as just another cog in our machine.
Yeah. And I was just having this conversation yesterday with some business owners about the onboarding process. And so, typically when you onboard, the first thing you talk about are the company's policies and procedures, and it's all about the company. And I said, we really need to reverse that. And it's all about being interested in your new team member and getting to know them. What are their strengths? What do they enjoy? What drives them? And so there's starting to be a thread here throughout this whole process that we're identifying that we need to start with being interested in them. And then the other thing that I'm curious about, as we look at this being, a dating scenario, and we want to get to know them better and that sort of thing, you also talk about in here that we need to go into it with the mindset of pushing them away. So how do we get to know them? And at the same time, we have this mindset of pushing away. So explain that a little bit.
Yeah, we work directly with business owners. Almost exclusively work directly with the owner. And the one thing I've learned about business owners is that they're so passionate and excited about this baby that they've created. Like, we're talking relationships again, right? Their business is their baby. And they're so excited and so passionate about it that what they do is they put on these glasses that are rose colored, right? And they just look at them. They're like, everything is perfect about this person. And what I really struggle with them is they love everybody, right? Like, everybody's going to help them take care of their baby. And so what we do is we help them work on this mindset of keep the person at bay, make them sell you on why they're right to take care of your baby, not the other way around. And that's a real struggle for a lot of owners because they just are so excited and passionate. They want to let everybody partake in this business that they're building. And so the whole concept of pushing them away is not, you're not doing it in like a belittling or a demeaning way. You're keeping them at bay. You're avoiding your emotional attachment to them until they're emotionally attached to you.
I see. Okay. So that's a really good point. So as we go through the screening process and the more in-depth interview, I think one of the really important points that you make is what you said about we want to disrupt. We want to break the usual pattern because we want the real person to come through, and we need to create the opportunities for that to happen. So if you could share some examples of what does that look like? How do we create the opportunities in the interview process for the real person to come forward?
So one of the things I want the listeners to understand, and this is a personal belief of mine, but there's a lot of talk right now about how disengaged job seekers are and how they don't complete applications, they ghost us for interviews, and just there's this lack of quality. There's this talk about this. And the one thing that I always challenge you to think about is that as employers, we caused a lot of this problem. You see, most job seekers never hear from an employer when they apply. Almost more than 2/3 actually never hear anything. Like, they hit submit and it goes into some big black hole and it gets ground up, and that's it.
Yeah.
And what we've done is we've trained job seekers over time that we really don't care about your applications until we care about your applications. And so,
ooh, that's so true. That's a painful truth. Yeah.
Like, it's hard to hear, but it's true. So what happens is job seekers now at the point, like, why should I bother with a resume? Some computer is going to screen it and I'm never going to hear from them anyways. So they just click a bunch of jobs and they hit apply, and that's it. And I think one of the ways to really stand out and be that disruptor is to create that personal engagement right at the beginning.
Yeah.
Like, they get a personalized email from you that says, hey, we got your application. Thank you so much. We're actually really excited to talk to you. We're going to be calling you in the next day or the next 2 days. And that's another thing, is set proper expectations.
Oh, yes.
Most job seekers, they have this expectation they're never going to hear anything. Or even worse, hey, great interview. We love you so much, but we got like 3 other people we have to talk to. So we'll call you if you're the right person. Like, you basically just said, we're never going to call you.
Yeah.
And so that we're training these job seekers they're just numb to this.
Yeah, we've created a process where they're totally disengaged even at the start of the process.
So one of the things we deal with a lot right now, especially in the front line, is ghosting. Mm-hmm. People schedule an interview or they'll schedule a phone call and then they just no-show you. Mm-hmm. And employers are just frustrated by this. Like, the job seekers just don't care. And I was just in a coaching session with a client. We were talking about this specific thing. Like, all of these people are ghosting the hiring managers. They're not showing up for interviews. And we said, well, what's in it for the job seeker? Have you created an emotional connection between the job seeker and your company, or between the job seeker and the hiring manager when you set the appointment? Because if you haven't, it's really easy to just say, cancel, I'm not going. So it really is one of those things where we need to understand that job seekers are emotional people. It doesn't matter. I had one construction client tell me one time, like, oh no, my guys don't get emotional about this stuff. I'm like, when's the last time they cursed out their superintendent? No, like 15 minutes ago. I go, that's called emotion.
It's emotion.
It's the wrong kind that we're channeling. People are driven by things that are more important than just an interview or something else, where they go to the interview and then what happens as employers? We tell them, we'll get back to you. Like, what the heck's that mean? So set proper expectations. Hey, we're going to meet from 10 to 10:30. And at 10:30, I'm going to tell you whether or not you're moving to the next step.
Nice.
Like, how amazing would that be if a job seeker got out of an interview and goes, I'm moving forward or I'm not? Like, there's no more uncertainty. Employers don't do that. Our clients do. And they have amazing show up rates for their interviews because job seekers understand what the whole process looks like.
So this is really key. It's the being different, and it's being the pattern disruptor and standing out. And it really is true. I remember years ago, even when I was applying for jobs, and this was before we had computers, I would just go drop off my application at all these different places, and it was spray and pray. So, and I can see that's what's going on out there right now, that there's so much truth in that. And so also, as we bring them through the process, you talk about in the interview, we need to get to who the real person is. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges business owners have, and why the interview process is such a point of frustration, because everyone looks great in the interview. We fall in love with them. I mean, exactly what you said. They're great. It's going to be wonderful. They're going to help us. And then we bring them on board, and 2 weeks later, we're beating our heads against the wall because it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe what they just did or said or, treated our client this way. And so how do we unmask that real person through the process?
So I think a lot of it is doing an interview that is not the standard interview. There are so many websites. I mean, even the job boards are dedicated to having articles on how to answer the where do you want to be in 5 years? And, what are your personal goals? Like, they know what employers want to hear. And there's so many people teaching people how to answer those questions. So one of the easiest ways to unmask is to get away from the, can you turn a wrench? Do you have reliable transportation? And all the basic stuff they know what you want to hear. Start asking questions about their behaviors. See, I have this belief that you interview for the things you can't or won't teach.
Yep.
Anything else you don't talk about in the interview.
Interesting.
I had a client just the other day. I forget what it was, but they were asking a question. And I was like, what's a humdinger and what does it do? Like, I don't remember what it was, right? It was some technical thing associated with their job. And I was like, that's a horrible question. They're like, it's really good because it tells us if the guy doesn't know what that is, he's basically saying he doesn't have the skills to do the work. And I asked him, I said, is that really true? Or is it possible they've never worked on that type of equipment before? He's like, well, I guess that's possible. I go, how long would it take you to teach someone that, what that is and what it does? It's like 3 minutes. So why are we disqualifying people over something we can teach them in 3 minutes?
Yeah.
Like, what I can't teach people to do is get to the job site on time. I can't teach that.
Exactly.
I can't teach someone to have respect for our customers. So let's ask those kinds of questions that shed some light on those things, and you'll really get to see the person's true character come through.
Yeah, it's the alignment of the core values, and are they aligned with what you want in your company? And you and I line up so nicely on that I believe that's the number one filter at every stage of the hiring process. As soon as someone shows you through their behavior or something that they share that they are not a good fit with your immutable laws, your core values in the company, it's like, that's it. That's where we stop. Because you can't train that. They're going to show up. That's who they are. Mm-hmm. And that's what will cause so much disruption down the road, is some out of place where they're out of alignment with those immutable laws.
Absolutely.
The other thing that I thought was really interesting, and I've seen this, I've experienced this both as an interviewee and on the business owner side, where you do the interview as the business owner and then you introduce the potential candidate to the team, and you get very different behavior in the interview with the business owner versus what shows up with the team. So I know you have a lot of experience with that. Share what you've observed and some of the things we can watch for.
Yeah. So one of the things that we look for, so we have a process we call the core fit profile, and it's the 7 factors that really helps you identify who is the right person. Like core values alignment is in that. But one of them is the disqualifying indicators. Like there are a lot of things that people do just naturally that would disqualify them from being the right fit. And one of them is talking behind the boss's back. And so what we encourage you to do is grab someone on your team that you trust, that you know is aligned to your core values and excited about your vision, and say, what I want to do is I want to leave the person with you. I'd love for you to just have a quick conversation with them. Like maybe as I'm showing them the shop or walking them around the office, I'm going to leave them with you for a couple of minutes. It's all part of the interview process. Have a conversation with them. At the end of the conversation, I want you to give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you think we should hire that person. And here are the things we're looking for. And just be really clear. And I can't tell you how many times we've done that or we've seen it happen where all of a sudden they just start bad mouthing leadership and they start talking about how customers are awful. And then all of a sudden the boss walks back in, the interviewer walks back in, they're all like all perfect again. And I love everybody. And it's just amazing how they'll talk to a peer differently than they'll talk to leadership.
Yeah. Well, and I think you take it even one step further because you talk about the possibility of taking them to meet vendors, even checking in with your vendors about how they related with them when the boss is not around.
Doing ride-alongs, yeah. Do a ride-along and go down to the supply shop and then leave them. Let them talk to the guys at the supply shop and like, hey, do you think this is someone that's going to be good? Yeah, is this someone you're going to want to work with? Even taking them on customer calls or even some sales calls if they're going to be customer facing. Like, don't grab your construction techs and take them out to meet your clients. But make sure that it's relevant to the role. Yeah, absolutely. Take them on a ride along and see how it goes.
Yeah.
Put them in the truck with a tech for half a day.
Well, and then the other interesting thing that you talk about is group interviews and observing. When you do a group interview, there's some interesting things that you're watching for that I don't know that we would normally pay attention to. So I'm going to give you a chance to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So group interviews can be really tricky. I call group interviews one of our ninja tools. They're like really awesome, but you could get really hurt if you do it wrong. So you just think about giving a kid a pair of nunchucks, right? It could be really bad or disastrous.
Yeah.
So it's one of our ninja tools, but for companies that are really clear on the way they communicate internally. And not all companies are, right? We do a lot of behavioral profiling to help people understand most effective ways to communicate. But once your team is communicating really well, it's a great opportunity to have them come in and meet the new candidate and sit down. Boss needs to leave the room, though, for these group interviews because you want them to be comfortable and you want them to be natural. But you can have these people and you give everybody a certain question to ask. And the people that aren't asking the question are watching for things like body language and the way they answer and do they squirm and was that a complete thought, or they're asking probing questions, to go deeper with the answers. So everybody in the group is in on it. It's what I see happen too often is it's like, hey, all of you come ask whatever questions you want. And we're like, hold on, we need a process here. But for companies that have really solid communication with the team that they have, bring people in. Peers are going to ask questions that leadership would never think about. They're going to hear answers different than leadership does.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is really interesting is watching the behavior of how candidates conduct themselves in a group of other candidates. And so in your book, you talk about, sometimes they will just flat out cut off the other person as they're talking or talk over them or I don't remember the exact word, but grandstanding essentially, like, I'm way better than all these guys over here and sort of behavior. And so you really do start to see who that individual is. And I think as a psychologist, one of my things that I've learned about the interview process is the longer it goes, the more likely you are to see the real person. So we're all able to put on that mask for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. But when you do a group interview or you invite the candidate out to dinner with a few key people at the company or other team members and their families, and what you start to see, like, who is this person really?
One of the things with doing group interviews with the candidates and having 10 candidates is make sure that it's right for the role. So here's one of the things that I've learned in doing this so long. is the worst interviewers tend to be the best employees because they don't have the practice of the people that are switching jobs all the time.
That's hilarious. It's so true, though.
Right. And if we're making decisions about resumes, I can't tell you how many times I've had somebody look at a plumber's resume and say, he's got bad grammar, I'm not talking to him. I'm like, he's a plumber. You should be happy he has a resume.
You're not hiring him to write papers for you.
Yeah. But on the other side, when you start comparing candidates, make sure it's right for the role because it can create that competition. So salespeople, great to do those kinds of interviews. But if you're talking, or even customer service reps that might have quotas or quality scores, might be great if there's competition. But if there's no competition natural in the role, you can really hurt good people who aren't used to competing like that. And they're horrible interviewers because they've had the same job for the last 12 years, right? They don't have the practice. So be really careful with that when you're interviewing people. So I used to tell people, they don't do it, but I used to tell people, if you spend less than 6 hours interviewing somebody, getting to know them, you don't really know the person. And people are like, it's a $12 an hour job. Why would I spend 6 hours? I'm like, well, how many times do you want to do this?
Yeah.
Because they'll be like, oh, I've got 400% turnover and that's just normal for our industry. I'm like, no, it's not.
No. So let's talk about that and the turnover, because so many business owners have hiring PTSD. They've had bad experiences. The hiring process feels time consuming. And then they feel like, oh, I know I'm going to get somebody. I don't know if they're going to be great. I don't trust my process. And so there's just this huge aversion to spending the time. And so one of the things that you and I have talked about is how your system and how what I teach really aligns so nicely, because it's all about filtering people out until they get to the interview process. And the interview process is really where you do want to spend your time. And if you have good filters in place coming into that, you will have fewer people that you're interviewing. It's a good sign when you're interviewing fewer people that you've got your process in place. And that time investment to make sure you've got the right one, because as soon as you say, I want to make you an offer and they come on board, it's hard to let them go and there's some sort of emotional attachment that business owners get because we've made the decision, we're bringing them on board. I think it really does have to do with our desire for consistency psychologically, that even saying at the end of the first day, it was a bad choice is hard to do for a business owner. So this investment of time, the 6 hour minimum to really get to know, even for frontline, entry level, field people, take the time to do it because turnover is incredibly costly. So what can you share about the cost of turnover?
Yeah. And turnover does not have to be 400%. Okay. You're going to have turnover because life happens. Like we've got people here and they have lives and things happen. You will have turnover, but you don't have to accept a 4 or 5 or we've had some people almost 1,000% turnover. And for those of you who don't understand, that means that 10 people and one person is there at the end of the year or at the end of 90 days. That's a lot. That's huge investment. SHRM has a stat, Society of Human Resource Management. And this was specifically for frontline employees, that when you add up the cost of time, you add up the cost in dollars for background checks and everything else, the HR department's time, payroll's time, owner's time, all that, it's $4,906 to hire one person.
Wow.
Do that math at 1,000% turnover.
Yeah. Well, the margins in small business are so slim to begin with. And so, I don't want to throw $5,000 out the window. Nobody does. And so take the time to go through that process. Ryan, one of the questions that a lot of business owners have on mind right now is, I can't be the Amazon of the world. I can't pay those wages. I can't throw out all those fancy benefits. How do I compete? Mm-hmm. What's your answer to that?
So Forbes just did a big article about Amazon probably about 4 or 5 months ago. And if you don't know, Amazon turns their entire warehouse staff every 9 months. So we're talking hundreds of thousands of people. The turnover at Amazon is ridiculous. And Amazon is known for having a very difficult work environment. And I don't want to get too much into it, but they're known for that. And what has happened is when you're Amazon and you don't want to fix that problem, because I can't imagine how long it would take to fix that problem, they found that it's easier and cheaper to just pay people above market rates to overlook the fact that it's not a great company to work for if you're in the warehouse. Now, I know people that work for Amazon who aren't in the warehouse and they think it's one of the best companies out there. But if you're in the warehouse, it's grueling work and they hold you to it. So what they've done is they've learned that for a couple extra dollars an hour, I can essentially bribe people. And here's the truth is that no one switches jobs for money. That's not why they do it. They switch jobs for something else. For money's a means to an end. Right? Like the example I gave earlier, we found out we're having twins, so I need a bigger house. They're not doing it for the money.
Yeah.
If they could get a bigger house by switching jobs, they would do it.
Right.
No, it's not about the money. And in fact, a lot of our clients, they will hire people who take a pay cut to come work with them because there's so many more things that are important. Like, do I get along with my boss?
Yeah.
Do I have a best friend at work? Do I feel like I belong and it's a place that I enjoy being when I could be home with my family? I mean, remember that. These people are choosing to leave their family and their friends and their hobbies to come work for you for 8 or 10 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Is it worth it? Is it worth the trade-off for them? And if you have a toxic culture, like a lot of big organizations do, well, they're going to pay higher because that's how they overcome that trade-off.
Right. And I will tell you, Ryan, one of the most interesting things to me is we have the opportunity to survey the A players on our clients' teams. And we ask them, what do you appreciate most about the job that you have? It's the simple things. Rarely does someone say pay. Is usually, I feel cared about. Respect is the number one response that we get. And in these construction companies and blue collar jobs, that is a huge deal. If you have a respectful work environment and people feel safe and supported going to work for you, you are miles ahead. You're far ahead of the corporate environment. But your competitors, those in your industry, in your same town or community, when you have a respectful work environment and people feel safe and have a good friend at work or feel like someone cares about them, if you do, the easiest thing to do to create that is one-to-one meetings with your team members so that someone is checking in with them regularly about and know who they are as people. And you set that up beautifully at the beginning of our conversation. Find out what's driving them because it's not going to be money. Money is the means to the end. There's a person behind it who has motives, who has needs, and connect with them. And that people they may leave for higher pay. And I've heard lots of business owners tell me, and then they come back because they realize, wow, it's not worth it to go to work in an environment where someone yells at you because you made a mistake. And by the way, those mistakes apparently are processes, not necessarily the individual that made the mistake. When someone yells at you for that, or if there's backbiting going on or lots of drama, that's not a healthy environment. People don't want to be there. That's why Amazon has that turnover that they do. And it's much easier if you don't have a great place to work. It's much easier to fix it in a small business than in a corporate environment. And everyone listening is in a small business here, so we're good.
Well, and that's just to continue the answer to that conversation, how do you compete with Amazon? You might have the most amazing culture and the most amazing team, but when job seekers find your company and they're not impressed and none of that information is out there and your employer brand is non-existent, they're going to keep looking. You could be the best company to work for. And if they can't see it from the outside, why are they going to take the time to apply? Why are they going to invest in interviewing with you?
Absolutely. That is it, because we have to stop being the best kept secret, essentially. So when there's good stuff going on our teams, we need to be sharing that out there in the world. Social media, newsletters, like one of the things that we do for our clients in our courses, we feature them in the Tap the Potential Great Place to Work Spotlight, because they're doing good things in their business. And that becomes a badge that they can put on their website. They get an interview either on the live with me or on the podcast. I like it because it inspires other business owners with the simple things they can do to create a great culture. But it's an opportunity for that business to show off, and say, look what I'm up to. And it really doesn't take a whole lot to stand out and be different, because so many small businesses especially, but even large corporations large corporations will give a lot of lip service to being great places to work, but they can't back it up. Small businesses don't say enough about how great they are to work for.
I do a lot of speaking events, and I always ask the question, how many of you have customer testimonials on your website? All the hands go up. Everybody's going. How many of you have employee testimonials on your website? And they're just like, I never even thought about that. Imagine if somebody went to your careers page and there was like 7 people from your team all talking about how awesome it is to work. I mean, we're all video experts now. Like, we're all photographers. We've all got a phone in our pocket. It doesn't have to be anything highly produced. Grab a couple employees, say, talk about for 30 seconds what it's like to work here.
Yeah.
And share that on social media. It'll do so much for you in being able to recruit good people who are going to align with what's attractive to them from that. They're going to align with your values and your vision. Now, don't grab the people that you wish you could fire and ask for employee testimonials. You don't want them to attract those types of people. But it's so easy to do things like that, or even an email list. We all create customer lists so that we can email them and tell them our specials and all the stuff that's going on. Imagine if you had a list of people who were in the industry and were open to working for you. And then when you throw the company Christmas party, you can send them pictures with an email subject line that says, wish you were here.
Oh, that's powerful. Yeah.
And it's simple little things that we don't think about, but recruiting is really marketing. It's really about getting your employer brand in front of the right people at the right time. That's like marketing 101.
Absolutely. I cannot agree more. So you and I know we could talk forever about hiring and recruiting and that process. I wanted to share with our listeners, you have a podcast, the Blue Collar Culture Podcast.
Yes.
So if you want to hear more with Ryan on hiring and the whole process, the core fit system, you share that on your podcast. And I know you have a free gift that you want to offer our listeners. They can get it on this board.
Yes. If anybody would like a PDF download of the book, you can get it at our website at thecorematters.com. And it's under the hiring tips section. So lots of great educational information, including the book download. So you can learn about some of the secrets that we use in the interview process.
Excellent. And if people want to get in touch with you, where can they contact you?
Same website, thecorematters.com. You can actually schedule time to meet with me and my team right on the website. So none of this back and forth, what's a good time? Like, you get direct access to our calendars. And then you can always check us out on social media as well. We're on all the big social media platforms. So
awesome. So this has been such a fun discussion, Ryan. I really appreciate you making the time to be here with us and the insights that you've shared. So thanks for a great interview.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for spending time with us today. Join our conversation in the Entrepreneurs Take Your Life Back Facebook community at tapthepotential.com/group. Share your aha moments from today's episode, ask me questions, and join in on the fun with your fellow entrepreneurs on the journey to designing sustainably profitable businesses that give you more time for what matters most and more money in your bank account than ever. And finally, share today's episode with a friend if you know a friend who would enjoy it. This is real life business. Keep your chin up, keep moving forward. You got this. If you've gotten value from today's show, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you are a repeat listener of the podcast, know that we greatly appreciate you at Tap the Potential. And to that end, I have a request. Please consider leaving us a review on whatever platform you're listening on. Our reviews help other entrepreneurs like you to find us. Be a part of our movement to help entrepreneurs take your life back from your business.